Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining Entropia's monthly professional development webinar. This is absolutely one of my favorite topics of networking, so I'm so excited that you have joined us. So for those of you that are new to Entropia's monthly professional development webinars, they are complimentary and open to anyone. So if you enjoy this seminar and you want to attend next month, or you feel as though you learned something and you want to share it, please feel free to forward the information to your friends and colleagues and allow them to join in as well. They are 30 minutes to fit your busy schedules. We have so much going on throughout our day, but it's really nice to be able to carve out at least 30 minutes of our time to kind of develop ourselves and learn some professional development techniques that will enhance us along the way. But I will remind you all that these are condensed versions. There's only so much that we can do in a 30-minute time frame. So they're condensed versions of full workshops or coaching offerings that I provide. So if you are interested and want to follow up or learn a little bit more about a topic or a little bit more about a subject that I touch upon, please feel free to contact us to schedule a full-length program delivery. You can visit us at the website, entropiaconsulting.com, or you can give us a call at 202-455-0426. When you registered, there was a spot for you to submit a question. If you had a question, a specific question about networking, you can still submit your questions. If you look to the right on a little sidebar, there's a place where you can enter questions. So as we go along throughout the webinar, if you have additional questions, I'll be more than happy to try to answer those. So let's get started. What we're going to do today, 4 simple things. First, we will be reviewing 3 fundamental principles of networking. These are principles that are not necessarily universal, but they're things and principles that I have learned, that I have used, and have helped me to be very successful throughout my professional career. Then we'll go through and discover some of the differences between active networking and passive networking. What does that really mean? We'll just kind of go through some examples so you can see, compare and contrast what an active networker or what a passive networker would be. Then we'll learn some tips about using social media to build an effective network. There are a lot of questions submitted about how do you use social media, how can you use it to build an effective network. So I just want to spend a little time on that. But the bulk of the discussion and what I would hope to find really valuable to you is answering your questions. And so there were several questions submitted with the registration, and at the end of the presentation I'm just going to go through and answer those questions, because even though I may be presenting useful information to you, I think that there's extreme value in answering questions that you, the participants, have provided. So, 3 fundamental principles of networking. Really simple. Know the purpose, know yourself, and know the environment. Now, I'm not going to leave it at that. I'm actually going to go into more detail. But I want you to just kind of remember those 3 principles. When you think about networking, fundamentally, you need to know the purpose, you need to know yourself, and you need to know the environment. Have you ever just kind of been sitting around and wondering and thinking about networking? I'm sure you start to have questions of, when should I begin networking? How many networks should I have? Where should I network? Or even, who should be in my network? Those are all very valid questions to be asking yourself when you think about networking. But I would challenge you, fundamentally, there is one other question that you should be asking, and that question is, what is the purpose of networking? Have you ever really stopped to think about why you are networking, or why networking is so important to you as well as to your goals or achieving your goals? Many of you in the U.S. or even in the other parts of the world may be familiar with George Ross. He is Donald Trump's right-hand man on the show The Apprentice. And one of the things that George Ross says really hits to the heart of networking and successfully networking. It says, to be successful, you have to be able to relate to people. They have to be satisfied with your personality to be able to do business with you and to build a relationship with mutual trust. And that really sums up what the purpose of networking is. You'll see I highlighted two words there, relate and relationship. So when you think about the first principle of knowing the purpose, it's really knowing what is a network. I'll give you two definitions. Network, the noun. Your network are those people with whom you formed a relationship based upon a mutual interest, and those people provide support to further your endeavors, and you to them as well. Keep in mind, a network, the people with whom you've built a relationship, it's more than just a connection. It's more than just people that you have known or that know of you, but you've actually formed a relationship. That's the noun part of the network. But we also start talking about networking, the action or the verb aspect. And so when you network, what you're actually doing is you're cultivating those relationships with people who have those mutual interests with you and can provide the support to further your endeavors. Now, it may be something that you're trying to do in the present, or it may be future endeavors. But the bottom line is, effective networking occurs when you're deliberate about building relationships. And that's something that has really helped me throughout my career, is realizing and understanding that networking isn't just about getting a job, or it's not just about getting to know someone to gain membership into a club or an organization, or having an opportunity to speak somewhere. Networking is about relationship building. And so when you start thinking about the relationship that you have in life, separate from those that when you're trying to build a job, what have you had to do to cultivate and nurture those relationships? When you start to apply those principles to your professional networking and building that network, I think you'll become a lot more successful, and a lot of the angst or tension that you have when you have to start networking will be lowered. Now, some of you may be saying, that's kind of fuzzy, or you might need to darken that up on your slides. No, it's actually intentional, because believe it or not, this is how so many people feel when they enter into a networking event, or when they feel as though they have to network. They're kind of invisible and back in the crowd, invisible of sorts. And rather than saying who they actually are, they ask the question, this is me? When really you want to get to the point of emphatically being able to say, this is me. You know who you are, you're confident in who you are, and you're standing out from the crowd. You can see the difference between the person in the background and the person in the forefront. That person stands out. That person will be more memorable. That person has a smile. I personally like smiling and encourage everyone to smile each and every day. Makes you feel better. But when you get to the principle of knowing yourself, let's explore that a little bit more. Knowing yourself in the context of networking, it means, what are you bringing to the table? What skills do you have? What are your strengths? If you've never done a personal SWOT, I would encourage you to do one as you are starting to prepare and enhance and build upon your networking skills. Now, some of you may or may not be familiar with a SWOT, but a SWOT is an exercise where you list all of your strengths, your weaknesses, any opportunities, and any threats that you have. Once you do that, that really starts to show you who you are, allows you to understand what it is that you're bringing to the table in building that network or building that relationship with the person or persons. And it also helps you to understand and determine how you can fill an unmet need And the second thing about knowing yourself and that principle is, what do you need? If there's one thing that I can say a lot of people kind of fall short on when it comes to networking, after you've built a relationship and someone asks you, well, how can I help you? What do you need? And people freeze. You've not really taken the time to think through what it is that you want or what it is that you need. But I would have to say that when you understand what you need, first of all, be honest with the relationship. Be honest with yourself and what it is that you need, but be honest with your network member and what it is that you need. And be specific with the ask. If someone is in your network, remember that's a person who you have built a relationship based on mutual trust, and they want to support you. So it's very important for you to be very specific with your ask, because if you're in my network and you come to me and you need help, I need to be able to understand and know what it is that I'm helping you with. It's not like this broad open canvas. I can't read your mind. I need to be able to understand what it is that you want, what it is that you need, and specifically how I can help you. So, principle 2 in knowing yourself, the effective networking occurs when you're clear about your personal value and what you have to offer to the relationship. Someone is saying they can't see the slides. I am screen sharing, so let me make sure. We'll take a pause here. Is there anyone else having problems seeing the slides? Yes, hold on. Let's see. There. Okay, so effective networking occurs when you're clear about your personal value and what you have to offer to the relationship. As a side, I will make this presentation available for the slides, so you can see we only missed a couple of slides in the beginning, but hopefully you're able to see the slide now. Let me just check. Okay. Thank you. Yay. Technology. So effective networking occurs when you are clear about your personal value and what you have to offer to the relationship. Again, if there's one thing beyond understanding that networking is about building relationships, it's really about knowing yourself. Once you spend time in getting to know who you are, what you have to offer, what you're bringing to the table, and what you need, you'll find that networking becomes a lot easier. You often hear people saying networking is a skill, networking is an art, but it does require practice. And one of the first things in those practice steps is practicing on knowing who you are and getting to know you. I absolutely love this little cartoon, and I thought it was kind of funny and cute. But this is something that all of us have probably, run into. One size fit all. I'm sure he'll fit. I'm sure he'll fit. And the same is true with networking. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to networking. It's a very specific to the individual and your personal style. But regardless of the one-size-fits-all approach, regardless of the technique that you use, the next principle is knowing the environment. As I said, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and you're really going to have to understand the environment in which you're networking. So the first thing that you do in terms of knowing the environment is, what type of event is it? Is it an informal mingling type of event where it's more conversational and relaxed? Or is it a formally organized event where there's a business card exchange or resumes or QR code? If you don't have a QR code, if you've not developed a QR code, I would strongly suggest doing this, because in those times when you don't have business cards or when it's not appropriate to have a business card, you can easily have your QR code. And all of us have smartphones these days. Let's utilize them and make a better and more effective use of our smartphones. Have your QR code, put your name, your email address, your phone number, if you have a website address, whatever you want to embed into your code. And then you can have people scan the code. I've done that several times when I don't have business cards or when it's not appropriate to do a business card exchange. You can easily say, hey, why don't you just scan in my code? That does a couple of things, and we'll talk about that a little bit more on the active networking, but it's something where you immediately have exchanged information, and it's less likely for that person to lose your business card or you lose their business card because it's already there in your phone that you carry with you day in and day out. Who will be attending the event? It's really important that if you're attending networking events, whether they're online or whether they are live events, it's really important, if you can, beforehand to learn about the participants and the attendees. Who's attending? Are there going to be people there in which you want to develop a relationship with? Are there going to be people there that could help you or that you could help? Because that's the other thing about the relationship building. It's not always about who can help you. Sometimes some of the greatest relationships and opportunities are provided and developed when you actually are helping someone else. So networking is a two-way street. Always remember that. It's not always about you, but more often than not, it's what you can do for someone else. Because remember, it's not just who you know, it's who knows you. So when you're at these types of events, whether you're volunteering, whether you're leading a discussion, whether you're introducing other people and making other connections, those are the types of things that make you memorable. The other thing about who will be attending, it's good to ask former attendees about their experience. Because just because there is a networking event, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's somewhere that you need to go. Is it going to be worth your time? And you can start to learn those types of things by asking people who have attended sessions before. So knowing the environment, principle number 3. Effective networking occurs when you develop and practice a style that best suits you and the environment. Know the environment. What type of event is it? You'll know if it's going to be informal. Do you need to mingle? Because one mistake that people make, especially a lot of recent college graduates or people that are at job fairs, when you go to networking event, if it's an informal event, a casual event, you have people that are pushing their business card or pushing their resumes, and that's really inappropriate because you want it to be a more relaxed environment. You don't want to make anyone anxious or nervous or really turn anyone off. You want to make a memorable, positive impression, not a pushy, negative, aggressive impression, particularly at a more relaxed or casual networking event. So just kind of keep those things in mind in knowing the environment and practicing your style. But keep in mind also, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. What works for me may not work for you. And you'll just have to practice a couple of times around and see which one actually works best for you. So passive versus active networking. It's kind of self-explanatory when you think about it, but I'm going to put up a slide, and rather than going one by one, I'll just have all of the examples listed here, and you can kind of look at them as I talk through them. But passive versus active networking, and see where have you fallen or where have you been passive when you could have been active in your networking approaches. So if you're a passive networker, in talking about the business cards, you would just kind of hand out your business card, whereas an active networker would ask the person for their contact information. You may say, well, if I get their business card, that's the same thing. But no, actively asking is very different because you're also engaging in a conversation. It's very easy to just pass out business cards, but you take that next step in actively initiating a conversation and asking, say, hey, can I have your contact information? The passive networker would then wait for that contact to call him or her. But that active networker makes that call within 1 to 2 days after that initial meeting. How many times have you gone to a networking event or met someone online in a LinkedIn group, but it took weeks or even months before you followed up with that person? You've got to be more active and deliberate when you are trying to build an effective and establish your network. Another example, a passive networker would attempt to arrange a lunch or a tea or some type of gathering a few days after the event. So you're at a networking event, you meet someone and you say, hey, maybe we should think about doing lunch one day. When I get back to the office or when I get home, I'll send you a follow-up note and try to arrange something. But that active networker is going to schedule that date and get a date set for lunch and tea at the event. Don't miss your opportunities. When the window is open, take advantage of it. The passive networker waits for someone to introduce her or him. But the active networker is going to be that person that strikes up a conversation and introduces himself or herself. That may be hard for some of you to do because you may be more introverted, but think about it. Most people that are at the networking event are there because they want to build relationships. So there's really nothing to be afraid of because everyone is there with the same intent as you. Even if that person who you're trying to add to your network is there. He or she is even there to try to learn more about you as well. So never be afraid to make that first step. A passive networker, and this goes back to those more shy or reserved people, those people that are kind of sitting back in the corner. The passive networker kind of stays to the group and will allow any introductions or opportunities that come from group speak to fall in their lap. But that active networker branches out and mingles with a variety of people at the event. You're not staying with your same circle of friends that you came with. You're very deliberate, you're very intentional about meeting someone new along the way. The list could go on and on and on, and if you can think of any more passive versus active examples, feel free to send them along my way and I can add them to my list for future presentations. But remember, effective networking occurs when you take active approaches rather than relying on others to facilitate your relationship building. I thought this was a pretty neat slide because it really speaks to how large this social media network, the social media frenzy has gotten. If I were to give a quiz, I wonder how many of you could successfully identify all of these icons in terms of the networks. Better yet, how many of you are involved or active or participate in these types of social networking applications or sites or groups? I can see a couple that I'm actually involved in, but there are others that I had no clue what they were. I actually had to look them up to see what they were. But social media networking, it's the way of networking of today. It's a tool, but it's not. It's a tool that you use to help build your networks. But you shouldn't rely on social networking solely to build your relationships. One of the interesting stories that I recently learned about LinkedIn even, it's probably the world's largest professional networking site. But when LinkedIn was starting to be developed, these guys actually had to have face-to-face meetings, sit-down meetings to develop a virtual networking site. So here they are trying to build a virtual networking site, but they realized that they had to network in person, face-to-face, in order to get it done. And so that's something that you should really remember as you are starting to use your social media networking sites, is it's a tool that you have to use. And so how can you use it more effectively? Well, the first thing is just that. Use it. Creating an account is only the first step. You got to complete your profile. And now I'm specifically talking about LinkedIn. If you have a profile on LinkedIn, it's really good to put a face with a name. It's really good to be able to see where you've gone to school, what your contributions are, some of your past work history. If it's possible to get people to do a few recommendations for you, that's good, and some endorsements. But complete the profile. So if you're trying to link in or connect with someone, they can see who you are and what you have to offer, and then they can determine if you're someone that they want in their network or if you want to be in their network as you review their profile. Yeah, I'm sure I'm getting a lot of sides on this one, but if you want to effectively use social media as a part of your networking strategy, you're going to have to dedicate at least 1 hour per day to the social networking sites, SNS, social networking sites. And in doing that, you're participating in discussions. You're not just the Facebook stalker or the LinkedIn stalker where you're reading about what everyone else is doing. You're actually participating in the discussions. You're adding value. You're starting discussions and you're participating. That's another way for people to get to know you and what you have to offer in terms of building those relationships. Then the connections that you make on the social media sites, just like your real live connections, you should try to communicate with 3 to 5 of those contacts per week. That communication can either be an email, phone call, depending upon your geographic proximity. It could just be something where you're, stopping and having a lunch or asking for a lunch meeting. But it doesn't have to be anything extremely long and drawn out, but you're making an active step of communicating with at least 3 of those people. So if you do 3 to 5 per week and you're making active contact with them, by the end of the year, you've actually kept in contact and developing relationships with quite a few people. So effective networking occurs when you devote the time and effort to fully engage with others on these social media outlets. It takes a lot of time. It definitely takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy. And a lot of people say, well, how do I have time to do this? And I have a full-time job. I have to do my research. I have a family. I don't have time to sit and do social media. Well, when you're deliberate or you're intentional about what it is and your purpose for networking, what it is that you want and what it is that you need, you will begin to find that time and carve out that time throughout your day to devote to the social networking. So know we're wrapping up, getting close to our 30-minute time. Just want to kind of summarize. Effective networking. Hopefully you gained something from the site, and I do apologize that the slides weren't up at the beginning, but effective networking occurs when you're deliberate about building relationships, because after all, that's what networking is. It's about building relationships. It occurs when you're very clear about your personal value and what you have to offer to the relationship. You've developed and you practice a style that best suits you. One size does not fit all. Practice what works best for you and what you feel comfortable in doing. You take an active approach rather than rely on others to facilitate your relationship building, and you devote the time and effort to fully engage in social media outlets. If you have other questions, again, I will make this presentation available, but if you have other questions, if you want to follow up, if you want a longer version of this presentation, I love doing networking. As I said, it's been very beneficial to me throughout my career, and I love sharing the knowledge that I have gained and experiences that I've gained with networking. Email me. You can visit the website, call. Please join my Facebook page. A lot of times we have discussions on the Facebook page, or I'll put out information there that's useful, or you can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Qualls. So just want to take a few questions here. Hopefully some of these questions I realize now that I've answered throughout the presentation, but one question that's really standing out is, when there's a really big fish that you're trying to connect with, what's the line between persistence and stalking? I think that's a really good question, because you don't want to go on that stalking line, but you do want to be assertive in meeting that person. But again, it goes back to knowing yourself. What is it that you want from that person, and why is it that person that you want to meet? When you're clear about it, as you have reached out to that person and you have made your intentions known, then if that person is interested, he or she will make the connection, or will make the network, or build a relationship. I hope that answered that question effectively. I mean, you're consistent, you're persistent by being clear in your ask and being clear in what it is that you want and what it is that you can offer. Another question, what's the best way to ask to be introduced to someone? Well, again, if you're in my network and you want to know someone, one of the first things that I'm going to ask you is, well, what do you need? And what you have to realize is don't take it personal if you ask someone to introduce you to someone else in their network and they're a little hesitant about it, because you have to realize that people spend a lot of time and energy developing networks and relationships. And so when they vouch for you or they introduce you, then they're expending some of their personal capital. And people are really cautious about spending that capital because you never know when you're going to need it or when you're going to need it in another environment. And so make sure that you're clear on what it is that you want when you're asking someone to introduce you to someone else. But it really is as simple as that, just asking. Well, it's 12:30 now, and I don't want to hold you any longer. Thank you for attending. I will also post the questions and kind of answer some of the questions that have been submitted for those of you that are interested. And thank you for attending, and I look forward to seeing you on next month. There will be a short survey at the close of the webinar. Please fill out the seminar survey, and that helps me to develop new webinars and improve upon the delivery. So thank you and enjoy the rest of your week.